Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin and Stacy. This is episode 509. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Stacy. That is at Stacy Patton89 on Twitter. Stacy, what's going on?
What's going on with you, man? I am Yabu buying the Knicks for next year. So
Not your finest work there. You really struggled with that one, but I'm sure you'll figure something out during the course of this podcast. Before we get started, and yes, we will be talking about the Knicks additions and free agency, along with many other things that occurred in the last 24 hours that changed the Eastern Conference anyway. But before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. First, that Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are, not done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise that you can find on our website at www.thestrick.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store, and there's all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Strickland, the podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant on everything that makes even more. But not a solo pod anymore. Host that with YC. You also get access to Strickland NFL, which you guessed it, is a podcast about the NFL. That's hosted by Konstantin Metrikos and Desmond Novak. And you get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Marino, one of the best in business. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier that's comes with a variety of additional benefits, like listening on our pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe or not. None of this would be possible without you. So without further ado, let's get started. The Knicks have, reportedly anyway, come to terms of an agreement with two players so far in free agency. They agreed to terms last night with Jordan Clarkson on a one-year veterans minimum contract that should be right on $3.6 million, which is the amount that he's left. He left on his buyout, left on the table in his buyout from Utah, so he's being made whole there. And then today, in a bombshell that was immediately overshadowed by a more significant news in the Eastern Conference, the Knicks agreed to terms with Gershon Yabusele, 2 years, $12 million. That is the taxpayer mid-level exception that they'll be using there. We have yet to see if he left a little bit on the table or if it's the full amount. We'll find out at some point. So, I mean, look, I guess let's start in chronological order. I know Yabusele is the more exciting addition potentially, but Jordan Clarkson is the first guy they add, or at least the first guy they came to terms with. I guess maybe, let's not do it individually. Just look at it as a total thing. If we're kind of assuming these guys are replacing players, what it seems like anyway, and I guess we'll see. It seems like Clarkson is replacing Payne or Shaman or maybe both. And Yabusele is coming in for Precious Achiuwa, who's 100% on his way out anyway. I don't know what your thoughts are about all of that, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, because to me, I think, like, I know the advanced numbers on Clarkson are not wonderful. He's had a couple of rougher years, we can say, in Utah. The guy can still really score. He fills it up. If you look at his, numbers on like EPA on dunks and threes, he's still I think he's like the 88th percentile in terms of points per 100 possessions this past year. The efficiency was at 54 true shooting. Not great. Not awful. Not like horrific, but not great. It's definitely sub below average, I guess you could say. But he does do a few things well, right? In terms of being able to create his own shot, something that the Knicks did not have enough of last year. And also just generally being able to get into the teeth of defense, getting into the paint, driving, being able to draw defenders, and creating for others after that. So I don't know. I'm I'm actually a bit bullish on this signing relative to maybe some of the surface level numbers.
You talking about Clarkson or Yabusele?
Clarkson.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, right, what makes a good bench guard, right? Your ability to attack with both hands, your ability to get to the free throw line, your one dribble pull up, your two dribble pull up, how you play with your back to the basket, um, who you are at the elbow, your ability to get to the hole, throw it down, finish at the cup. That passing shit, I promise you, it comes. We did get the ball don't stop endorsement on this signing, but
Yes, big.
um,
I don't know if he gave us an endorsement on the Yabusele one. He might have been busy celebrating the big beautiful bill being passed. So who can say?
ooh, Canadian interference. No, what I'll say is, look, if the baseline is campaign, that's an upgrade. I don't think you would disagree with that, right?
I mean, it's a weird one where it's like I think Payne in his
I'm not
regular.
shitting on Payne, by the way. I just
Yeah, no, I know you're not, and I do think like he gave them good minutes in the regular season. I think a lot of his like positive on off net swing stuff has more to do with a misfiring starting lineup and the fact that Cat at the 5 against bench units, which is the lineups that Payne played in most, was almost like a cheat code. It's like playing on easy mode a little bit. So I think that buoyed some of his impact. Um, and he definitely did not close the year the way he started the year. He's a very, very streaky player, much like Jordan Clarkson is a streaky player. But yeah, I mean, on just eye test wise or whatever you want to put it, it's very hard for me to reconcile like the idea that there are things that Payne provided that are intrinsically valuable that we can't quite see or capture in traditional box score metrics that make him more valuable than Jordan Clarkson. So for me, yeah, like I think Jordan Clarkson is an upgrade, and maybe even more importantly than being an upgrade, I just think he has a skill set that they need. Like they needed somebody who has the ability to score in bunches off the bench. They did not have that last year. They had the lowest scoring bench in the league. They had the lowest scoring bench, I believe, in the playoffs. I don't think that judging the qualitative nature of a bench group is necessarily best served by how many points they score, but there is something to the idea of like, yeah, it is useful to have somebody that can come in and score in those bunches that the Knicks didn't have. I mean, you look at a guy like Ben Mathurin, right? For the Pacers, where like the impact stuff on him isn't necessarily great, but when you're watching these games, you can feel that there is a value to just having a guy who like, despite his flaws, despite the bad defense and whatnot, that is there that can help keep the scoreboard moving, even when your best players are sitting.
Yeah, and Clarkson just gives you a much better version, right? I think with Payne, he's very effective at the things he does. He can get up a three, and he's reasonably efficient. Um, he's reasonably efficient with that floater, but he can't really finish at the rim. I think most importantly, he doesn't leverage. He's unable to like. It's weird because he's definitely a threat inside the arc, but nobody really pays attention to him like that. So he might be a good passer. I don't think he's a selfish player, but it's just it, that's just not how his game engenders the defense, right? So with Clarkson, there might be a little bit more upside there. He's not exactly a, a guy as a passer, but he can score at three levels. Um, I think what it So I think he's an upgrade. For everything you said, I think Clarkson does it at a better level than Payne. He might be a little bit less accurate of a shooter, but he also gets them up at higher volume. He shot 40% above the arc or above the break. Um, he's streaky, but he's very quick. Has that ability. You can protect him on defense a little bit. You don't have to play him at point of attack because you can play him with deuce or even heart. I think the question is in terms. So, like, I think for the min, if you're talking about baseline, is this a good signing? It's easy. If you're talking about upside, that's what interests me because he's had injury issues. He's played on an unserious team for the last 2 years. In 2022, if we got Jordan Clarkson for the min, it would have been the best deal in the league, or one of them, right? So, is it because he's 32, or is it because you know injuries and could New York? Well, we've talked about the health staff. We've also talked about the fact that he's going to be in a serious environment. There will probably be an adjustment period. By the way, we've seen this with Bridges. We saw it with Boyant. We saw it with Burks. When a guy goes from a team that is not trying to make the playoffs to a team that's trying to win a title, there's an adjustment, but you're not going to be relying on him for defense, right? So I think the floor is pretty solid, right? He's going to give you some buckets on a team that needs it. Um, Payne, I think, competed a lot more on defense. I'll be interested to see how much that matters. Like Payne was not a good defender, but you can never question his effort. I think Clarkson, you can. We'll see how much that matters. But I think that's the upside is like, can you tap back into that? And he's not a guy that he is quick, but he's not super reliant on athleticism. So with that engaged, with maybe being in a place where, no, I shouldn't just try to finish over a 7'2" guy with a floater when he's right in my face. I can kick it out. Do you get back to that efficiency that he had? I do think that for the backup guard spot, ideally you'd want someone who can play with Brunson, and not just in the deuce way where floor spacer and a point of attack defender, but someone who can actually, like, I think a lot of people have said the ideal guy next to Brunson is Derek White. Can't get that. But someone who could. This is why I was never that into Sexton, because I knew like ultimately he's still just Brunson's backup, which one he would never be satisfied with because he's a much better player than that, and two, you're overpaying for that even if he was satisfied because he can command starter money essentially. But we got Clarkson for the min. There's a solid floor there. You know that you have a guy who can run the backup bench next to Deuce. How will he play? I think one of the most frustrating things about campaign was when he would call his own number when you have Cat on the floor, right? I think the worst thing was you'd see 3-4 possessions with Cat running the bench unit. And you said it's like a cheat code. There's times they didn't even go to him, and Cat and Payne would just go down and take a shot. I'm curious if that happens with Clarkson, but it's not hard to see this signing being definitely a positive in the way campaign was. But and I do think campaign was a positive signing for the men, but maybe some upside there too.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things like the Utah, you can play around on PvP stats, and you can like look at the on-offs. It's really hard to kind of figure out what is driving what on a team that's that directionless. That's not to like try and make an excuse for Clarkson. At the end of the day, like there's a reason there was no trade market for him to the point that they bought him out, and there's a reason why we're able to get him on the minimum, right? Like he's a flawed player. He is a player getting into his mid-30s who has shown signs of decline as far as his finishing inside the arc. He has his 2-point percentage has declined over the last 3 years. So, that's a trend. Maybe some of that has to do with circumstances versus any actual athletic decline. That's yet to be seen. You just have to kind of take those things at face value. What I find interesting are a couple of things. Over the last 3 years, Clarkson has played 916 minutes with Markkanen and Sexton on the floor. Now, obviously, these are not one-for-one comparisons. Lauri Markkanen is not Cat. Colin Sexton is not Jalen Brunson. But in those 916 minutes, they had a plus 3.22 net rating. They had 120.67 offensive rating and a predictably bad 117.45 defensive rating. I think that is encouraging in the sense of this is the idea, right, of Clarkson playing alongside another guard capable of creating their own offense in terms of Brunson, or like in Sexton being their version of Brunson or something, and a stretch big who is a talented scorer in Markkanen, whereas obviously we have Cat. So I find that interesting. I think that if you just take out the Markkanen stuff, so over the last 3 years, Clarkson and Sexton have played a total of 1,438 minutes together. They have 118.52 offensive rating in those minutes, a minus 1.3 net rating. Again, if you go through it and you want like it's again, it's very, very hard to figure out what the hell is going on with this team because of how many players they've rostered and given time to over the last 3 years. But you're talking about a near just over almost 1,415 minutes sample over 3 years with a variety of rotating pieces around them, where Clarkson with Colin Sexton, neither of whom I think anybody would describe as elite players or elite offensive players even. They're scoring at like a top 5, top 10, or top 5 kind of level, 118.52 net offensive rating again. So those are encouraging signs, right? Because I think I think most people will understand, right, without any necessary explanation, why Brunson and Clarkson together in a backcourt is not something that you can sustain as some kind of like major component of what you do night to night. But to know that you have the ability of like, okay, you know what, we really need to just get the scoreboard going here. Like to see that he has some comfort doing that alongside another ball dominant guard. I think that's encouraging. And, he had like a 37.5, I think, pass percentage on drives last year. That's a little bit below Brunson. That's higher than a guy like Donovan Mitchell. So he's not, I'm not calling him some like the most unselfish player in the world or something. He's definitely a bit of a Chuck anyway. But if your idea is like, if you kind of view him as, can he be a less accurate 3-point shooting, more dynamic, off the bounce, better passing version of Alec Burks? Like, yeah, I think he's definitely capable of doing that. And he will be playing with the best team he's been on in his career. Like, there's not much else to say. This is the best team he will have played on in his career. The last time I believe that he played on a team that had real expectations was the 21-22 Jazz, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just checking here because I know he won Sixth Man of the Year. That was actually the year before. It was the 2020-2021 with the Jazz. That was the year they made the Western Conference semifinals and lost to the Clippers. But he won Sixth Man of the Year that year. He scored 18.4 points per game. He was an efficient player. And he kind of carried that over into the following season as well when they were still a really good team. Like, but that's kind of the last time he's been on a good team. And, are you buying low? Are you like, I guess the best way I could describe this is I think it's better to go into this expecting or not expecting much, but being optimistic about it, because I do feel, I don't know, when I've watched him over the last couple of years, I don't feel like I've watched a guy who is athletically worse. I don't feel like he's less explosive or less capable of getting into his spots inside the arc or whatever. I think there are some real shot selection issues. Is that, has playing in, kind of an organization that's directionless and there's no real leadership, at least on the floor. Will that be like, has that kind of ingrained that into him in terms of bad habits, or can that be overcome? That's obviously a question mark. But I do think there's a lot of encouraging things here with him. And even though he's not a good 3-point shooter, as you raised, he's like a 33.5, I believe, for his career, maybe 33.6% for his career. He gets up volume. I think he's at like 11.4 per 100 possessions over his last 7 or 8 years in the league. So he gets up volume, and teams don't treat him like a non-shooter, which is, as we've talked about many times, arguably more important than what you actually shoot in a lot of ways. And he's good at attacking closeouts, right? Like that's a thing the Knicks really did not do well last year. They did not attack closeouts well. Honestly, that's a kind of a skill set they've lacked for a while. Their best guy at attacking closeouts over the past 5 years was probably like Grimes in 22-23. That's just not been something they have a really strong skill set of. Maybe Derrick Rose in 2020-2021, but yeah, that's about it. So I think that ability he has is pretty key. when you're talking about potentially playing off of Jalen Brunson or Karl-Anthony Towns or whatnot. So that's encouraging to me. I think we both agree that nobody should pretend the defense is going to be anything other than really bad, right?
Yeah, his defense is bad, but like again, so was Payne's, right? Um, and that's kind of you're asking Deuce. You're like, let Deuce take the point of attack. Look, if Clarkson is going to be playing against bench units, for the most part, most bench units, as we've seen with the Knicks, are going to have one guy, right? So you play the Pacers. I mean, Deuce has had his struggles with TJ McConnell, but you can ask him to guard Ben Shepherd or someone like that. Will it cause problems? Yeah. But it's not like Indiana's going to give the ball to Ben Shepherd and be like, let him cook, right? Maybe that's a bad example because it doesn't look like they're going to be particularly relevant next year. But Cleveland, they're going to stagger their guards, right? You're not going to ask them to guard Darius Garland. I guess I'll throw this back to you. How much of it do you think is effort, and how much do you think it's physical limitations for Clarkson in terms of defense?
I don't know. I mean, Clarkson's just a bad defender. I don't know how much more there is to like say than that. I've seen him die on screens. I don't think his effort level is necessarily there in terms of, okay, I died on the screen. Now I have to recover to my man, closing out the shooters, understanding his rotations and stuff like that. But, that's not what he's here for. And honestly, like, you're getting the guy in the veteran minimum. I don't think we should be expecting him at age 33 to suddenly morph into like a guy that he's never been. Like that's why you're getting him on the veteran minimum.
Yeah. So I think for that level, it's fine. I wish he could play next to Jalen, but they'll probably play Deuce next to Jalen more. I do think we've talked about the fact that we've wanted a secondary playmaker, and I understand the cap constraints and all that. This doesn't solve that in that starting lineup, right? Because it's I don't think it's particularly reasonable to say Clarkson's going to play significant minutes next to Brunson in the playoffs for sure. Do you think a new coach changes how much you need that, because maybe he's utilizing Cat in such a way that you can leverage his playmaking more and that kind of thing?
Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? Sorry.
Yeah, so I think we've both talked about like the Knicks need another perimeter playmaker next to Brunson. I don't think Clarkson is going to be that because you can't really play them together that much. Maybe when Cat's off, and if you put them with Mitch, OG, Mikal, or even Hart, that's enough defense. But that's a small backcourt. So how much do you think that need for a secondary perimeter playmaker next to Brunson, not just backing him up, could get alleviated by a new coach?
I mean, I think there's some of that's at play. I mean, that's assuming like, report. We'll talk about the coaching stuff in a little bit, but there's reasons why you moved on from Tibbs. And one of those reasons was the lack of creativity offensively, the lack of just like utilizing all five guys on the floor in a lot of situations where it just becomes like a two-man game or a one-man game or whatever. So, I think some of that can get alleviated by a new coach, different system, more ball movement, more player movement. But how much? I don't know. I mean, I think like for all of the great ball and player movement, right, that the Pacers have, I think part of the reason they have some success, or part of the reason why it's so hard to contain them offensively, is they almost always have two guys on the floor that can capably handle the ball, run a pick and roll, right? It can be Halliburton and Nembhard. It can be McConnell and Nembhard. It can be McConnell and Halliburton. They almost always have two. And then I think their wings, in terms of Aaron Nesmith, Ben Mathurin, those two guys very specifically, Obi, Siakam, if you count him as kind of a big wing type. They're guys that can attack closeouts capably. And I don't think, I think Bridges can attack closeouts. Last year, he settled for a lot of mid-range jumpers when he did it. I mean, there's nothing else. I think OG settled for a lot of mid-range jumpers when he attacked closeouts, even though I think he's a little bit more, he's at least more capable of kind of handling the contact at the rim in some ways, but he's a very weird finisher, so who the fuck knows? But they don't have a dynamic closeout attack guy. So, can you overcome that stuff? Yeah, I think you can. I think there's a world where you're able to do it, but I don't, like, to your point, Clarkson's not going to be featuring in their closing lineup a bunch, I don't think. Who knows? Maybe we see him and Brunson play together and they're just so fucking good offensively, it doesn't matter. But I don't think that everything is solved by just a different coach or a different system. I think there are still some flaws inherent in the personnel that are on the roster.
And how high is that ceiling, I guess, is the question. And I know if you knew that answer.
We can do this later. We're not doing this right now. Let's do free agent stuff. This is free agency. This is not the what is the ceiling of the team segment of the podcast.
No, I meant ceiling of ball movement and how much can scheme add. But we can table that if you want as well.
I mean, there's no way to answer that question. How are we going to answer that question right now? How much? What was the ceiling of the Cavs before Kenny Atkins?
Mushrooms, man. That's what ayahuasca.
But I'm serious. We don't know. All we know, we can theorize, and I do feel strongly that the offensive ceiling of the team wasn't reached. But as far as more micro level, granular stuff of how much better can they be in terms of ball movement, player movement, passing, I don't know. I can't answer that. I don't know that there's a way to answer that. All I can tell you is that I think the offense can and should have been better. And I think whoever the next coach is should be held to that same standard. If the Knicks are, let's say the Knicks are a great defense next year for however they do it. Let's say they're a great defense, our top 7-8 defense, but the offense is 10th. Will they be a better team on net? Yeah, they will be a better team on net. But I don't think we would all be sitting here being man, the offense is great. No, we would be the offense should be better. And I think that's the standard. The offense should be better than it was last year. It started off great, and it sucked then after that for 4 months. It was mediocre and then flat out bad in the playoffs. So you're talking about 5 months of the season. Season's about 8 fucking months that the offense is just not good. That can't happen. And if that continues next year, no matter who the coach is, no matter what the aggregate of the team is, that's a problem. And that's really the only standard I think that matters. If they get there because of, different ways, fine, so be it. But it just has to be better than what it was for way too long.
Yeah. So to answer your question, then I think Clarkson I view him as a campaign replacement. I think that's an upgrade. I don't think that should be controversial. He's better at basically everything on the basketball court except maybe defense, and that's marginal at best. And there might be a little bit of upside if the last 2 years were depressed from playing on a non-serious team.
Huh? Sorry. Yeah. No, I don't know. We'll see. I think the campaign thing is whatever. He was fine. He was good. He couldn't play next to Brunson either. That was a problem. I think Clarkson maybe has a better ability to do it. Who knows? We'll see. Hopefully, we have a coach that experiments. For all we know, campaign could have been awesome next to Jalen Brunson in bigger minutes. We just never tried it. Because why? Because we never tried it. So a next coach comes in and tries stuff. That would be a big improvement to me. Okay, moving on. The Knicks did sign Gershon Yabusele, also 2 years, $12 million. I'm pretty excited about the signing. I think that he gives you versatility as a 4 or a 5 that are pretty enticing with this team. He should be able to play in different lineups with Mitch, with Cat, at the 5 himself. That's something he did with Philly quite a bit. He's not a strong rebounder at the 5. So I don't know that you want to play that lineup a ton. And if you do, you're going to be betting that you win on the strength of just like insane offense. But you also have Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, I know they're not the same player, but it's like if you want to go 5 out, you have Cat, so who knows? So I do like the versatility he provides, and I like the fact that he can cover both spots. I like the fact that he can play with both of their main bigs. Are both of their main bigs going to be here when the season starts? Who knows? We will see. They also have Ariel Hukporti on the roster. He's somebody who I expect to be in the rotation. Yabusele should be able to play alongside him as well. So yeah, I mean, I think with both Clarkson but more so with Yabusele, I just like how you can envision them playing alongside a lot of different guys in different spots in different places, and it makes sense. It's not a stretch.
Say that again. Sorry.
Just their versatility. Like I like Yabusele's versatility.
Yeah. I mean, I judge versatility more on defense because I think your position is ultimately determined by who you can guard. So that's why I think of Deuce as versatile, even though he's not a quote unquote true point guard, right? So Nemo, for example, from the Strickland chat said, Yabusele is actually a fine defender if you have him play the 4. He looks worse because he often has to play the 5. This is a comp I threw out. I wonder if he can give us what Obi Toppin gave us, right? He shot 40% from 3, or I think at least above the break. It's a high-level finisher. He can get you buckets, right? So he's not ideally like, he's probably a better shot creator than OG.
Yeah.
So like he can give you that stuff. I've always felt like he's physical and high effort on defense. Maybe not the most intuitive guy, maybe not the most laterally quick, so you don't want him switching on to guards. But it does introduce some interesting opportunities, right? He's not a bad rebounder, actually. He's a decent rebounder. Could you play him next to OG at the 5? I think I'd still prefer OG. Like, if we're going to go unconventional at the 5, I'd prefer OG to Yabusele, but Yabusele might be a better rebounder. So can you play them together, right? Can you play him at the 3 with double big lineups, knowing that if he's got Mitch behind him, that can erase a lot of his issues? I think that, and he's a real floor spacer, right? So, I think we have to start. I think the biggest thing the next coach will have to, I think it keeps coming back to coaching, right? Because I think we had versatile pieces last year. We just didn't use them. Can this coach use the players more as chess pieces rather than checkers? That might be a lazy analogy, but I think you get my point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's an interesting player. He's 86th percentile in offensive EPM last year, 17th in defensive EPM. Defense is not a strong point. I do think some of that, I'm not sure that he's a 17th percentile bad defender. I feel like that probably is somewhat of a function of the disastrous season and kind of roster that Philadelphia fielded on many nights last year. But he's definitely not a plus defender, so you're gonna have to deal with that. But yeah, the offense with him is very encouraging because it's not just a guy who's like, I just pick and pop, right? Like, yeah, he has the pick and pop, but if you close to him, he can attack those closeouts. And he's not just a straight line driver. Like he's not going to be Euro stepping and, doing all kinds of crazy side shifts and stuff like that. But he does have some fluidity to the way he attacks closeouts. And he doesn't try to do too much, which I think is a quality trait. Like he was he had 16.7 usage last year. That was 45th percentile in the league. So like he's not forcing the issue despite being a good, capable, talented offensive player. He is not a great, like he's not a prolific passer, but he's a pretty decent one. He was in the 52nd percentile in assists per 100 possessions, 4.2. Does turn the ball over quite a bit, 51st percentile in turnover rate. So he's not like a great passer, but he's not a disaster with the ball. He's not a no no skill. Like he's not going to make open like passes that are clear. Probably the best way to put it. I think that is, when we just talked about, can we make the team, how is this team going to be better at passing and how realistic is it? I do think it's interesting looking at both guys like him and Clarkson, where they are not perfect. Obviously, they have their own flaws, but they do bring a modicum of ball handling and playmaking that other guys don't. I mean, in the instance of Jordan Clarkson, again, he's like a pretty turnover prone guy. He's at, 3 straight years. He's in the top 5% or 5th percentile or better, or worse, I guess I should say, of turnovers per 100 possessions. Last year he was in the 5th percentile, the year before 5th percentile, year before that 3rd percentile. But also in those years, last year 82nd percentile in assists per 100 possessions. Year before that 87th percentile. Year before that 82nd percentile. So, you're maybe rolling the dice here a little bit in terms of the turnovers ticking up from a couple of these guys, but you are introducing 2 players who are they're at least interesting in terms of their assists or their ball handling and passing. Just for some comparison's sake, last year OG Anunoby 9th percentile in assists per 100 possessions, 57th percentile in turnovers. Mikal Bridges last year 56th percentile in assists per 100 possessions, 37th percentile in turnovers. So you're giving yourself a nice little dose here of guys that are capable of ball handling a little bit. Not in terms of maybe like, definitely not in the case of Yabusele anyway. Like running, these are not guys you're going to run offense through a bunch of. Clarkson, obviously you can to some extent, but you're not like expecting them to be offensive engines, but they are guys who are capable with the ball in their hands of making plays at times. Yabusele more benefiting off of kind of like advantages created for him versus a guy like Clarkson who has a little bit more juice to create those advantages himself. But I think that's pretty important to consider when we're looking at all of this. The defensive stuff, obviously, again, they're not going to be plus defenders. And when you're shopping in the veterans minimum market, when you're shopping with the taxpayer mid-level exception, you have to accept that these guys are going to have flaws. Yabusele he's not going to be flying in and getting a bunch of blocks and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Clarkson's not going to be flying in and getting a bunch of blocks. It's just not going to happen. So, I think they've done well for themselves. I think these are guys that add some skill sets they lack, have their own drawbacks, but they're not. They're well-rounded enough within, as you mentioned, like in terms of the idea of like these guys are chess pieces. I think they're well-rounded enough where you should be able to, and a coach who's willing to kind of figure things out should be able to find lineups and lineup constructions that they are beneficial to and help drive.
You don't think they will have that, or?
I think they will have that.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think in terms of playing with the starters, Yabu has a lot more upside there. You mentioned his versatility. Do you think Clarkson can play much with the starters? Can he play with Brunson?
Yeah, we just talked about this. We think he can, but that's not for big doses.
Because I guess I don't know. I think I'd have to see. We're a little bit Tibbs. I don't want to say snake bitten. I'll say I think part of it is the kind of Tibbs experience. Playing into this, but that's why I'm higher on Yabu as an additive piece. Whereas I think Clarkson will amount to just a better version of campaign. So that's kind of where I'm at. I don't see him like if we play Oklahoma City, I don't think he's going to be playing with Brunson. If we play Indiana, maybe, but you're already hiding Brunson. Where do you hide? Clarkson?
I don't think we have to worry about Indiana next year.
That's a good point. If you're playing Cleveland, and you're playing their starters, where do you hide Clarkson, right? So I think that's why I'm just higher on Yabusele. I do want to say I like the Yabu signing. For the same money, I kind of would have preferred Jake LaRavia. I don't know how you feel about that.
You would rather have Laravia?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little more upside. He's 23. I think he gives you a little bit more on defense. The shooting is probably the same. I think he's a little bit better of a playmaker. Gives you that connective piece. Like I do think like as much as we want more connective passing with both of these signings, neither of those really give you that, right? The chance to like Yabusele will give you spacing that amplifies.
I don't agree with that. I think Yabusele can definitely give you connective passing. I 100% believe that. I don't believe that Laravia is anything special as for like just as a comparison. Last year he had a lower assist per 100 possessions than Yabusele. Lower turnover rate, but lower like a slightly lower assist per 100 possessions. Like I don't feel Laravia is necessarily some meaningfully better piece. And like, again, I don't want to be Mr. EPM here, but again, EPM has Yabusele better offensively for sure, worse on the defensive end, but overall a more impactful player. Yabusele was a more efficient player. I don't know. I don't agree with that actually. I'll be completely honest. I think Laravia is. I'll put it this way: when he signed with the Lakers, I did not give a shit. I couldn't have cared less. I did not care about Jake Laravia. If the Knicks had signed him, like cool, fine, whatever. But I mean, who the fuck watches Jake Laravia? Have you been crunching Jake Laravia tape?
Pat McAfee probably does, but
like this is my point. Like I'm not trying to like fucking air you out here or something. But I just feel like this idea of Jake Laravia, the guy fucking got traded to first of all, the Grizzlies did not pick up his option. Then they traded him to the Kings. Yes, because maybe, we're not going to be able to re-sign him because now he's actually okay, and we declined his option, so let's trade him to the Kings. Okay, so there goes the Kings. The best offer he got, and what did you say? He's 23 years old, right? Laravia?
Yeah.
23 years old. He's a fucking big wing, 23 years old. If he's this good, if he's as promising and some like dead certain guy that team should be at, why wouldn't the Nets just sign him? Why wouldn't the Nets be like, 2 years, 12? Okay, we'll go. They've got fucking $5 bajillion to spend. They don't have fucking diddly squat on the fucking roster. Why would they not just be like, yeah, we'll give you 2 years, 16 million? If it's that simple. And who the fuck knows? Maybe Laravia didn't want to come to the East Coast. Maybe Laravia wants to be on the West Coast for all we know. Right? We don't know. We don't know what happened there. All I would say, though, is I think Jake Laravia benefits a lot from the fact that nobody fucking watched Jake Laravia playing for 3 fucking years. That's what I think he benefits from.
And it is interesting because I've seen these free agency debates for so many years, right? The first one I can remember is when everyone's like, the Knicks need to get Greg Monroe. He was 2015, maybe, the marquee free agent. And the Bucks signed him very quickly. And the Knicks got Robin Lopez, and that actually was a better signing for cheaper. So I'm I like the upside with Laravia, but I definitely get it. I do think he gives you a little bit more on defense, but
no, he definitely he almost definitely.
But also,
does.
Cran just posted some not very flattering numbers about Laravia's help defense as well. I guess yeah, I mean, do you see this team though? Kind of the two acquisitions they've had are subpar defenders, to put it lightly, or offense, but who can get you a bucket. Do you think that is the identity the team is leading into? And you don't want to read too much into a constrained team signing a vetman and then their only real asset for arguably the best guy they could get with it. Do you think that's the identity they're leaning into it, whether it's by choice or necessity?
I don't think we should judge any of this as a reflection on the whole right now. I'm not I'm not breaking any news. I don't know anything, but I'm not convinced that they're not like there's something like if they sign Yabusele to the full taxpayer mid level, and then sign 2 minimum contracts or whatever they have to do to fit under the second apron and fill their roster spots. Maybe something like 36,000 under the second apron or something. Again, this is why I think it's important to wait. Maybe Yabusele took like a certain amount under that, less than the full taxpayer mid level. That makes that less concerning. How tight the margin is there. I don't know. But if he didn't, it's very possible the Knicks still have trades that they're working on or lining up. Like we still don't know. Mikal Bridges has still not been signed to an extension. Mitchell Robinson has not been signed to an extension. These are 2 guys that are entering the final year of their contracts. We know that the Knicks generally do not like to play contract chicken with a guy entering the final year of his deal. I'm not convinced.
When could they have signed Bridges to an extension?
I mean, they could talk. They could have talked to. They can talk to Bridges. They could have talked to Bridges as soon as the season was over.
So it's not like there's a date after which
they can sign him officially on July 6th. Mitchell Robinson.
If there was an agreement, it probably would have been announced.
Yeah, there's definitely not an agreement yet. And Mitchell Robinson has the same deal. He can extend at any point. Obviously, they haven't come to an agreement yet. We don't know what is happening behind the scenes there, and I'm not calling like, yeah, these guys are gone. I don't know that's true, and I think the safe money is always on that it's not true. It's easier to keep players than it is to trade them, and we know that the Knicks are in a contention window. So whatever your misgivings may be about Mikal Bridges or Mitchell Robinson, as far as performance or health or whatever the fuck your issues are, they're good players. And if you lose them or if you trade them, you better be getting back something that you feel very confident at least keeps you at the same level you're at, if not improves you in some way. Now, finding what those deals are not easy. They're not easy. So I'm hesitant to answer the question, mostly just because I don't think we can answer with full confidence what this team is right now. Do I think that they feel it's easier to hide a bad defender than make up for a substandard offensive player? Yeah, I think that seems somewhat to be the case. But I mean, I'm not breaking any news here, but I think that if you gave them the option, they'd like to have guys that could do both. So, but yeah, like I don't know. I'm wary to answer because I don't think we know what the full vision of the roster is quite yet.
I think the key is somehow leveraging Cat as a playmaker. Like that just needs to happen. Like you need to unlock Brunson fully, and I'm not saying that he hasn't been unlocked, but to unlock him where he's just making it impossible for defenses as opposed to just really, really hard. You're using him off ball. You're making them account for Cat and Brunson at the same time. That's what I see on this roster right now. You were saying that you're higher on Yabusele's passing than I am. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? I mean, can he add some playmaking juice? Because he has the scoring gravity, obviously. Do you see that? Because a comp that I brought up in the strict court is, it sounds a little like Obi Toppin, right? Not a very good defender, but shoots very efficient at the rim, very efficient from three. Big guy, explosive, not in the same way, but he's quick for his size. He's stronger than Obi.
He's got good feet.
Yeah. Pause. Okay, Rex. Is that a good comp? And I mean, do you think that I'm underrating his playmaking here? And could that be something that could juice the offense a little bit in a Hartenstein-esque way or something like that?
I mean, I don't think he's not Hartenstein. And I don't think he's like a great playmaker. I just don't think that I think he's capable of making quick reads. Like I think
He's
he
not a
is
black hole.
yeah, more than that, I think he makes quick reads. I don't think the ball sticks with him. I think he makes quick decisions, and that helps keep your offense flowing. Like as good as like OG is awesome, but he is not a quick decision maker at times. Mikal Bridges not the quickest decision maker. Josh Hart sometimes tries to do way too much. Right? Karl-Anthony Towns is, I think, he has he, his flaws are different than Randall, but both of them have a tendency to hold on to the ball before and allowing defenders to kind of crowd them and making exacerbating their own issues with that. Jalen Brunson, I think he plays quick when advantages are created for him, but we know that when he's on the ball, when he's the one initiating, he's very deliberate. So um, I do think there's something to Yabusele being a quick decision maker off of advantages created for him and kind of helping create like cascading effects of the initial advantage. I don't think the Knicks had enough of that last year. I think that's kind of what Hartenstein was really best at when he was in New York and what the Knicks benefited from. So, hopefully Yabusele can help inject some of that into his minutes. I don't know anything about his injury history, but he did play 70 games last year, 1,895 minutes. Probably would have played more if they weren't just blatantly tanking down the stretch of the season. So that's good to see. And obviously, we know that he was, he's just making his rounds around the Atlantic Division here. Started his career with Boston, comes back to Philly. Now he's with the Knicks. But yeah, 30 years old. It's worth mentioning he has a player option in the second year of this deal. So if he plays really, really well, he's probably going to bounce. And it would be very difficult for the Knicks to keep him in that scenario. So this could just be a 1 year kind of like, a 1 year stand, as they call it. But hopefully it's a hell of a year, and hopefully it's one that we all remember. Just like the best of all of those.
It can only get better. Yeah, I think this is. I mean, last year we wanted Yabusele, right? So, and we were all freaking out when the Sixers got him. And to his credit, he played well. It wasn't his fault that the Sixers are managed like the platonic opposite of their football team. But this is the other thing I'll ask you. I think we've all talked about this. Neither of you or me was shedding tears about this Julius Randle trade. There seems to be a little bit of a but we have both also lamented to varying degrees that the team this year, and this is something that a lot of people have talked about, didn't have quite that same, like, it used to be a pain in the ass to play Tibbs teams, right? This team was very talented and a challenge, but they weren't going to impose their, like you play Julius Randle for 48 minutes, you're going to ice up the next day. Do you think Yabusele gives them some of that and brings back some of that intensity, which, they signed PJ Tucker, but obviously wasn't going to play. So there's a limit to what he can actually influence on the court. Do you think that brings some of that back?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a little bit of that, like his top of the key playmaking and stuff. Sure, I think there's a little bit of it. I'm not expecting him to be the same.
I'm talking about the physicality, like get into a guy, 6'9", 260,
Saying maybe, like, I don't, maybe some of it, like, I just, the physicality thing doesn't really, I didn't really buy that last year. I didn't think that was a big deal. I think when we talk about physicality, we're talking about actual skill sets. Like, does he have a skill set that embraces contact more, maybe, or something? Like, sure. But, I think there is something to, like, these guys play a little bit. I think both guys play with a little bit of an edge. So that could be a good thing.
So you're saying Yabusele is the Dave DeBusschere for this team?
Correct. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Or maybe the Anthony Mason is the floor. Anthony Mason floor, Dave DeBusschere ceiling. I think that well, let's talk about this, right? A lot of people were freaking out about the Knicks not having a coach signed before free agency. Or, sorry, I got to go on a rant first. And this is something I wanted to talk about when you were talking about what I said with Laravia. Can we talk about how fucking insane the discourse about the Hawks is? Like, I don't want to name names. I have people I respect a lot saying, Hawks, I think they could come out of the East. Because they got, if he was good, his name would be fucking yeah. They got what? They got KP, which admittedly I do respect his talent quite a bit. I'm not a KP hater anymore at all. I think he said the right things. He's a good pro. But he's hurt all the fucking time. We saw him in that Celtics series. Like, he was a shadow. That guy barely existed. And it was sad to watch. I wish I didn't have to watch you fumble around and fuck it up. But am I crazy for thinking like I don't fucking care about the Hawks at all?
I mean, I think the Hawks are better. I think they're quite a bit better. It's kind of impossible to talk. Like, the entire conference is a fucking mess right now. The Pacers, Halliburton's out for the year. They just lost fucking Myles Turner to the Bucks. And I think the weirdest thing now that I'm seeing is Pacers fans suddenly saying Myles Turner is not that important. And like, I don't know. Like, I don't think Myles Turner is like the greatest center in the league. I think he's probably closer to like the 12th or 13th or 14th best center or something like that in the league. I don't know. I have to sit down and like go through the list. But like, losing him hurts. Like, you can't deny that. And fuck if it hurts or not. Like, the reason they lost him is literally the owner didn't want to pay the tax. Not because they would be over the first apron, not because they'd be over the second apron. He just didn't want to go into the tax. That's it. He did not want to go into the tax. They have reportedly the biggest offer they gave was $3 or $60 million. Look, maybe they know his value better than anybody, and they'll be proven right. That 4 years, $107 million, which is effectively like a fucking like $50 million a year contract, considering that the Bucks waived and stretched Damian Lillard, which is going to have a $22.5 million dead cap hit on their cap sheet for the next 5 fucking years. Maybe that will prove to be I mean, in totality, if you keep counting the waived and stretch factor, it is definitely an overpay. But maybe just his contract alone will be proven to be an overpay. I'm a little bit skeptical of that. 4 years, $107 million is the exact number that RJ Barrett was signed for when the Knicks extended him in 2022. Like, Myles Turner, to me, is definitely worth that contract. And I think it's fucking insane that a team that went to the NBA Finals is letting him walk because they didn't want to go to the tax, and their justification is that Halliburton's going to be out for the year. Halliburton's going to be out for the year. He's not never playing basketball again. Like, you can't I think it's a joke. I think it's a joke, and I think, this is not even a small market thing. This, like, you can't pay the fucking tax. You can't pay the tax. You're not going to pay the fucking tax for a fucking finals team? Like, I'm sorry. That's insane to me. It's insane to me. And Pacers fans that I've seen justifying it because, oh, well, Turner sucked in the fucking finals and he's not good at this thing and he's bad at this thing. And that's fucking horseshit, man. That's horseshit. Like, what are you doing with the money? Let's see what they do with the money. Maybe they're going to do some awesome shit with the money. But that is not going to happen this offseason, in all likelihood. And they have to then make that up in next summer. Like, so we'll see. I mean, they have all their picks and stuff like that. So who knows? Maybe they're going to tank it out this year or something. I still think they have too many good players to just like completely bottom out. And I can't envision Rick Carlisle just like doing that for a full year after they just made the finals. That seems a little bit odd. I'm also very interested to see how he feels about. I would love to know how he feels about this. I would love to see how to truly know how he feels about this. But to go back to the Hawks, like, yeah, so just based on that alone, right? The Bucks kind of having their own issues, and then they kind of did like the mutually assured destruction nuclear weapon thing that we're all totally scared of all the time. Like, why countries don't launch nukes at each other when they know the other guy has a nuke, because you're like, well, then we're just killing ourselves too. The Bucks were like, fuck that. We're killing you and we're killing us. But yeah, the Hawks
are Trump is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, maybe. The Hawks, they're going to be better, 100%. I think they have a very, very good chance of being as high as the 3rd seed. Who knows? They can get lucky. Injury strike for maybe the Knicks, maybe the Cavs, whatever, and who knows? Maybe they finish the 1 seed for all I know. But I think it's, you look at the rosters in full, and I still don't think they stack up with Cleveland or New York. I don't. And
I think they stack up with Orlando.
I feel differently about that. I think both those teams are below
Detroit
the Knicks
lost
and the
a
Cavs.
lot. Otherwise, I would have said them. But
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think Atlanta and Detroit are below the Knicks and the Cavs. I tend to like Atlanta more just because I think that end of the day, I know that Trae Young can create a shot when I need him to for himself or for others. I don't feel that way about Orlando. Maybe that's too simplistic of a viewpoint. But when I see conference finals, the conference favorites to come out, that's a bit much for me. I think a lot of this is banking on the theoretical version of Porzingis returning, which I'm not sure why anyone would be so confident about that. He obviously was not himself. He was a shell of himself last year. He didn't play. He couldn't last through his first year in Boston, where he largely was a non-factor in their playoff run to the championship. So, there's a lot of questions there. Jalen Johnson's coming off an injury. I'm not, saying he's going to be some diminished version of himself. But I also think that the player he is not necessarily as great as a lot of people think he is. Is he what is he? If you ranked players in the league, where is he? What is he, the 28th best player in the league? 30th? I don't know. I don't know how you'd rank it, but
oddly specific.
I don't know where people would rank him, but to me, he's not an all NBA player.
Is he tall enough to be a 1A?
No. But he's not an all NBA player. Is he an all-star? Yeah, he's got a good chance to make an all-star team next year. But we also know the Eastern Conference is weaker than the West. So is he really a top 25 player? Is he a top 30 player? Is he a top 35 player? I don't know. Where do you rank Trae Young in all of that? Is Trae Young a top 25 player? Is Trae Young a top 20 player? Where is he? I don't know. I don't think they have the top end talent. And I don't think their depth is as good as it seems to be the consensus. Have they won the offseason? Yes. They've won the offseason because they've upgraded their talent level and they got a fucking golden ticket in their hand handed to them by Joe Dumars. So they've had a very successful offseason so far. I'm not, downplaying that at all. But when I see people acting like Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke fucking Kennard are these significant needle movers that push them past the Knicks or past the Cavs and make them favorites in the conference or something like that, I think that's bananas. I think that's fucking crazy. And, there are a lot of stats out there you can find that will tell you the Hawks had some of the best shot quality in the league last year, that Trae Young creates some of the best shot quality for his teammates ever. I'm not even disputing that those are necessarily, I'm fine. Let's just take that for what it is. Do we know that some of that shot quality isn't influenced by the fact that teams are this team can't shoot, so we're comfortable giving up those shots to them? We don't know. I think there's more to all those factors than that. And yeah, at the end of the day, if we're going to sit here and I have to hear about all fucking year that fucking Jalen Brunson is this huge defensive liability that's impossible to overcome, then I'm going to throw the same thing fucking back at the idea that Trae Young that's not Trae Young. Trae Young isn't that. That's exactly what Trae Young is. So, yeah, I think they're better for sure. Do I think they're getting gassed up a bit too much? Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. I don't see it. And, I don't know shit about the draft. I don't follow it anymore. They drafted Asa Newell. Maybe he's awesome for all I know. But from what I've read, it feels like he's a lot like a Jalen Johnson type of player. And that's a versatile piece, but it's also a piece that I'm not sure is going to be I wouldn't bank on him being a significant contributor next season. I think Reza Shea had a nice rookie year, better than a lot of people expected, and he closed it really well in the back half. But Do I think that he's ready now to be a high-level playoff wing? No, I don't think that. I think Dyson Daniels, I talked about it last year. He's a guy that I'm pretty high on, and I think he showed really, really significant progress last year. But is he like? Are they really going to be a dynamic offensive threat with him and Nickeil Alexander-Walker as kind of like the wings flanking Trae Young? I'm not sold on that. I'm not. And like, is Kobe Buffkin going to ever give them anything on the floor? We'll find out. Okongwu is good. I think they have some nice. Like, I think it is interesting for them. They can play big, right? Like, they can play Jalen Johnson as a 3 and have Okongwu and Porzingis at the 4 and the 5. That's something that they didn't have the option of last year. I think it's interesting that they have a guy like Porzingis because Trae Young hasn't played with a real quality pick and pop big like that. So these are interesting elements they've added to their team, and they are certainly trending in a better direction than they were last year. But if you were to tell me the biggest reason, or if you were to ask me what the biggest reason to be optimistic about them moving forward is, I would tell you it's that fucking pick they have from New Orleans. That's what I would tell you. I think the best thing that they have going for their future is that pick they have from New Orleans. I don't think it's Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Kristaps Porzingis or Luke fucking Kennard. Maybe Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson's the only other thing you could I'd be like, all right, yeah, I get that. None of these other pieces are as important to them as that one piece they got in the trade. So in that sense, I think they've won the offseason because they made good roster moves and they got this awesome lottery ticket out of nowhere. Kudos to their front office. But like, when we're talking about competing in the East and potentially getting to the finals or whatever, I'm not there at all.
I mean, I think it's just such an incredible insult to this roster. I like Jalen Johnson a lot. I don't think he's better than Cat. I think anybody that compares Trae Young to Brunson is. We need to do that. We have OG. He's better than Dyson. If this team is healthy, only team I'm worried about is the Cavs. I just thought that was insane. It's like, all right, you can say that they're a contender, maybe.
Dark horse contender, sure, yeah.
And there's surprises every year. I am higher on Orlando than you are. But I do want to also talk about this. There was a lot of consternation. It's been close to a month. I think, is it a month exactly? Did they fire Tibbs on June 1st? I think it was June 1st. So it's been a month, and the Knicks still don't have a coach. According to Mark Stein and others, they're closing in. It seems likely that, if I had to read the tea leaves, what seems to be the most likely, maybe not the majority probability, but a plurality at least, is they hire Mike Brown and Borrego is somehow brought on as an assistant, which I like. They've been interviewing defensive coaches, right? Kidd is known as a defensive coach. Jenkins is known as a defensive coach. Nori is the defensive specialist in Minnesota who made Cat work. Who helped build the 4th ranked offense. And Mike Brown. So you have an offensive assistant. Maybe they're interviewing these coaches in terms of how much they'd be willing to listen to input. Brown's track record seems to be pretty good in that. But they signed, if you told me, given what they had, they would sign Yabusele and Clarkson, I think we would have all been happy with that outcome. And those are guys that had probably opportunities at other teams. We know for a fact that Yabusele was considering Denver as well. So playing next to the greatest, you tweeted this, playing next to the greatest player in the world, and he chose a team without a head coach. Is it fair to say that, I mean, what's going on, I guess? Like, my kind of theory is that, my theory is this, right? If you had a coach where the biggest issue is he wouldn't coach the roster, he coached his own construct, I would say if there's potential, there's still potential moves, right? Maybe there is a Giannis trade. It might be a 5% chance. Or maybe there's, we can talk about LeBron. I don't think we talked about it on the pod yet, but maybe there's a chance you end up getting LeBron James. Or maybe there's other, maybe you trade Cat for more depth, right? Maybe you trade Bridges. My theory kind of is that they have an idea of who they're looking at, but they do want the roster to be a little bit more set so they can pick the best coach to match that. given what just happened. But it also doesn't seem like it affected free agency much. This is a well-functioning organization. So curious to your thoughts on that.
I don't think the coaching thing has ever mattered. Not in the price points that they're shopping. Like you're talking about veteran minimum to tax-fair mid-level exception money. These players are not. Forgetting me that, like, you know what? Let's just say even for these players, the coaching is so important. There's two parts of this that I think are fundamentally fucking stupid. One, the front office is and always should be the most important voice as far as shaping a roster, because they are the people that are in charge of not just being stewards of, hey, we're trying to build a team to win right now, but also we're trying to build a team to win right now, while also giving us a runway to compete in future years and maintaining integrity under this restrictive salary cap and blah, blah, blah. They have to manage so many different things. So they should always have the biggest input and say, and always do have the biggest input and say in who you go after, who your targets are, how you shape your roster, how you want to build everything out, right? So that part of it to me always kind of was like whatever. And additionally, part of that is you want to pick a coach who aligns with how you plan on doing those things. Guess what they're doing right now as we speak? They're doing a coaching search. Do we think that it's possible that they talked to these coaches that they interviewed about their targets in free agency, or the archetype of players that they were going after in free agency, and how they felt about that, and how they would use those players, and how they envisioned those players blending in with the totality of the rest of the roster? Yeah, I bet you that's a conversation they fucking had with all of these coaches. So they probably felt comfortable with the knowledge of, like, okay, if whoever, let's say they had 3 guys at each spot, right? Like, okay, these 3 guards and these 3 combo forward, stretch big types, whatever. Like, we know whoever we hire, whether it's Mike Brown, whether it's Mike Inori, whether it's Taylor Jenkins, whether it's James Borrego, whether it's Dawn Staley, like, we know that they will be comfortable using these players, and we know that we're aligned with them. We know that they agree with kind of how we see those players being used, and that's also how they would plan on using said player. If you know that, and I'm sure you've had those conversations in those interviews with those guys, and with Dawn Staley, like, that's fine. Like, there's no issue there. And then the like second piece of this is just simply that, like, you can't. The Knicks could not fire Tom Thibodeau until the season was over, right? Like, that's a fact. You were not firing him. You're not going to fire him in the middle of the fucking, like, playoffs. So you have to wait until it's over. They fired him, what, I think 48 hours within 48 hours of the Pacers series being over. He's gone. Like, they can't rush the process of hiring a new coach just because free agency is coming up. That would be a huge mistake. That's how you compound errors. That's how you make that's how you make monumental errors. I think you have to take a patient and prudent approach, especially if you don't have a successor in hand, right? It's different if you have some coach in waiting on your staff that you're like, and you got a chance to see him perform or something like that, right? Like, we saw that with the Nuggets, right? They had David Adelman on the bench. They fire Mike Malone before the playoff starts, and whatever, they see what they wanted to see from Adelman. He gets the job. The Knicks didn't have that on their bench. Like, that's a major reason I thought it was insane to even want Tom Thibodeau fired during the season, because we're going to have assistant coach, or we're going to have interim coach Mo Cheeks, interim coach Rick Brunson, interim coach fucking Othello Harrington. Like, no, that would have been stupid and terrible and a total waste of time. So I think going through the process, being patient, being prudent, taking your time, building out your coaching list, building out, okay, who can we interview, getting all that stuff right is fine. And the fact that they had limited resources, yeah, in some ways that works to their benefit, right? Where it's like, hey, we only have this limited pool of money that we can even throw around, which means there's a limited pool of players that are even available to us. We probably don't need to worry about selling these guys on the fucking coach. And guess what? If you did talk to the coaches, again, you definitely did talk to the coaches, and it seems like they're trending in the direction of probably hiring Mike Brown. We'll see. Maybe the reporting right now is not accurate. Maybe Mike Brown won't get the job. But if they have an idea of who their coach is going to be, or at least the idea of what any of the coaches they hire, what their vision would be, then you can pass that on to players and agents in your communication with them and be like, hey, look, we understand that you might have some trepidation because we don't have a head coach in place. Here are the guys that we're talking to. Here's maybe the short list, right? And everybody we've talked to, they're all excited for the chance to work with you. This is how they would use you. This is how we see you fitting in. They're aligned with this. Like, if you can have that conversation and kind of express those viewpoints to the players and their agents, and then the money is right, yeah. And guess what? The situation is good. The Knicks are going to be a really good fucking team. Look at both players they signed, right? Jordan Clarkson, 1-year deal. Gershon Yabusele, 1-year deal. Or 1+1. He has the option to enter free agency next year. These are guys that are trying to put themselves in an advantageous position to potentially showcase themselves and then enter a more liquid free agent market where there's a lot more money available around the league and they can cash in. So you have that going for you. Like, hey, do you want the spotlight of New York? Do you want, to have that with the benefits that come with that? And, for some guys, that's not going to be the case. Like, I saw people getting mad that we didn't go after Gary Trent Jr., but like, I think if I'm Gary Trent Jr., I would rather go back to Milwaukee because I'm going to get as many fucking shots as I want, probably. I'm going to play 35 fucking minutes a night because there's nobody at my position. And because Milwaukee now has early bird rights on him after this year, or following this season, after the season of early bird rights on him, they can give him a lucrative contract next summer. And on top of that, because it's his second veteran's minimum contract with them in a row, he gets a no trade clause this year. So, like, there's a lot of reasons why a guy like him would want to stick in his position. All of this stuff is very, very hard to go through and kind of understand everybody's individual decision making. But to bring it back to your original question, like, no, I always thought that was overblown. And I just kind of ignored people freaking out about it leading up to free agency because you're not going to convince somebody who's like, there are people that are just going to have PTSD about the Knicks until the day they win a championship. And even at that point, they're probably still going to have PTSD anytime something happens that isn't totally comfortable, that isn't totally status quo, that isn't exactly what you expected. But this front office has consistently operated in ways that are not industry standard, let's say, not standard operating procedure. And they seem comfortable to do things that are not normal. Like, the way they treat the draft to me is not in line with how most teams treat the draft. We talked about this in the days after this year's draft, where it seems like they view the draft and operate in the draft different to how a lot of other teams do. There are good things, there are bad things to that. But the reason why I just tend to give them the benefit of the doubt is the aggregate of their work is positive. Like, it's that simple. The aggregate of the work is positive. Positive to the point that this is the most talented Knicks team they've had in fucking, 25 years. Talent, like, positive enough that we have gone from a joke to, okay, we're 2 wins away from getting to an NBA Finals. Like, when you see that progress and you see it happening under these decision makers, I tend to give them the benefit of the doubt. I if that makes me like a fucking corporate shill or whatever, like, fine, so be it. But I think they've earned the benefit of the doubt. And this coaching search thing to me has seemed, again, is it weird maybe the way they're going about things? Sure. Do I have a big fucking problem with it? No, I don't. Like, I don't care. Like, if you want to cast a wide net and you want to see who's available, just go see who's available. Like, go see who's available. I mean, you don't know who's available until you ask, right? Who knows? Like, what if Chris Finch secretly hated coaching Julius Randle and it was like, fuck this, they're going to bring him back next year, I want out. Like, what if you don't ask the question? There's no potential for that to even come to light. So, yeah, like I'm fine with how they've gone about it. And would I prefer that a coach was in place before free agency and the draft? Yeah, of course you would. Of course you would. But I don't think it's some big crisis, and I never thought it was a big crisis that neither of those things occurred.
Yeah, I think we're pretty aligned. I think there's been a lot of just. I think people are scarred, and the reporting of Dolan being in the exit interviews was just the word Dolan just brings people back. It was funny. Ian Begley, I think Blames tweeted this, but Ian Begley had to clarify that Leon has been in the coaching interviews, but that's standard practice. So I think that I think they're in a good spot. I mean, look, let's be honest. This is kind of the closest they've been. We've been saying that for a year or two now, but it's the fact. There is no Boston. There's no Indiana. Because team they've beaten before, the guy that was arguably the most important person for them to beat them is still on the roster. That team itself, I like the Larry Nance signing. I think people are overblowing. Who's the other person they signed? Defensive specialist, right? Who else did Cleveland get?
I'm
Besides,
sorry, you broke up a little bit there for me.
Besides Larry Nance, who did Cleveland get?
Lonzo.
Yeah. So I mean, look, Lonzo's a very good player. I would have liked him on the Knicks, but not healthy. It might amp up the defense, and Lonzo, when healthy, is a very amplifying player. Again, I don't think the guy's played a playoff game before.
He's not.
So, and Nance is a solid piece, but you already have Mobley and Allen. I still really like our chances. There's nobody's keeping Mitchell Robinson off the glass, and there's no one who can guard. I don't think Lonzo can guard Jalen Brunson at this point in his career. I don't think he's a great defender, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that was really his forte, right? He's better at guarding up and he's better at help defense. So I think they're in the best spot they've been. So I believe now they are capped at the second apron, right? Hard capped. And they have a vet min and then a little bit less than that. So they can extend Kevin McCullough, which seems like it'll be what they do. What do you think they do with that last min?
I mean, for all intents and purposes, it seems that it will. I mean, again, we don't until we know the numbers on this Yabusele thing for sure. It's a little bit uncertain, but it seems like it would have to go to maybe like a James Najee and then Kevin McCullough, or like some real low experience type players to fit under the cap. So, I don't. In my ideal world, I would prefer somebody like Landry Shamet could come back and then you add like James Najee and you call it a day or something like that. But I'm not sure that's in the cards for them right now.
So you're saying McCullough will get the min?
I don't know who's going to get the minimum. I'm just saying that would be the type of player. One of those, like a low experienced player, is going to get one of those spots.
I mean, there's a few. Why would Shamet not? Is his minimum too high? Is that the reason?
Yes, it could be too high.
I think a name that's been floated around is Johnny Juzang. I don't know if that works with the cap. I think he's only 24. But he gives you wing size shooter, not a good defender. Wasn't expected to be a good defender out of the draft, but Utah is a tough place to judge. Do you think there's a move like that maybe they make, right? He's a very efficient shooter and he's big, so it's the kind of wing they haven't had. It doesn't help on defense, supposedly, but he gives you some size.
I wouldn't mind him. I've kind of liked him. I called him out as somebody I wouldn't mind buying low on if possible. So he'd be an interesting bet to me. But I'm not really like, I don't know. You're talking about the 13th or 14th guy in the roster here. Like, in all likelihood, these are players that you don't want to be banking on. So I don't really have strong thoughts on it. I think if I were to say what would I like, yeah, I would like some type of like bigger wing. I think we could use one or two more of those type of guys, but when you're on the minimum, like it's hard to find big wings that matter. It's kind of the nature of the minimum contract. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not that concerned about that. I'm a lot more concerned about the coaching staff. Like not in terms of head coaches, I'm going to be head coaches, but I'm a lot more interested in how this coaching staff will be filled out. We got reporting today that James Borrego is somebody that they would like to target as a potential offensive coordinator type. If they hire Mike Brown, there was also some reporting from Mark Stein that Rick Brunson would stay on staff, which to me is a nothing burger. Like he doesn't have any ambition to be a head coach. I don't think he's like an undermining guy in that sense. So I'm not bothered by that. And then there's also reports that like they would potentially retain some key assistants. That was from the Stein report. Also, I'm guessing that's probably up to the head coach. Like, so whoever they hire, I think will have, I think they'll have some say in like which of these assistants will or will not stay. And it's also possible that some of those assistants might talk to the head coach and be like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm not really feeling this. Is it cool if I bounce? Like, there's always, it works both ways.
Does that go for the assistant who's the star player's dad?
I literally just said he's going to be on the staff, dude.
You think he's going to be on the staff?
It was reported in the article, which I just cited, and said that he was going to be on the staff. So, yes. He will be on the staff. Rick Brunson will be on the staff.
Yeah, they haven't hired the coach yet. That's what I'm kind of getting at.
I think you can, again, we just talked about this, dude. You can have do you think it's possible that they were like, hey, Taylor Jenkins, would you give a shit if Rick Brunson's still on the staff? No, I would not care. Okay, cool. We're going to have him on the staff. Hey, Mike Brown, would you care if Rick Brunson's on staff? No.
Does he have the associate head coach title?
Yeah, you can just give him a different title. Doesn't really matter. You'll be like, all right, you're the assistant to the assistant head coach, dude. That's what you are now. I don't think he cares. I'm not worried about that. I think anybody that's like is worried about Rick Brunson's association with the New York Knicks coaching staff is reaching very, very hard. And ultimately, like, I'm sorry if Jalen Brunson wants him on the staff, like, that's fine. If his big demand is I want my dad on the coaching staff so that he can like do pregame warmups with me, yeah, I'm cool with that. I don't think it's that big of a deal. But I am interested in the Borrego thing. I am interested in like how that will work. And he's an interesting basketball mind to me. I thought he did a good job in Charlotte. They have completely fallen off since he was canned. Not all of that is purely because of coaching, but I do think that matters. Their offenses were quite effective while he was there. They played fast, a lot of movement. So these are all the things that we were looking for. I think he checks off a lot of the boxes. So I'm definitely, like more than any of that, like I'm very interested to see how the coaching staff gets filled out because, Mike Brown's a hell of a defensive coach, but he has some offensive shortcomings. And I think making sure that you have a staff that supports him in those kind of areas is pretty vital if he is going to be the next head coach.
Yeah, it definitely seems like they're prioritizing defensive coaches. We don't know the conversations they've had. Maybe Borrego has been interested in coming to the Knicks for a while. So they probably feel like, well, we have a guy we trust on offense. What can we do on defense? If we have a guy that we can have as an assistant, we probably don't need to give him a head coaching job, but he can contribute. So what we're looking for is a defensive guy who's willing to work with him in maybe a way that that Tibbs wasn't. It makes a lot of sense. I think that, and even if you look at the head coaches they've gone after, Donovan isn't the most defensive guy, but Houston has built a really strong defense. We know that Ime can coach that side of the ball. That definitely seems to be the trend. I am curious. Do you have any thoughts about why they, if they're doing this kind of methodical search, why they wouldn't ask Johnny Bryant for even an interview?
I mean, they know everything there is to know about him, right? So maybe they just. I mean, what I would say is, why did Johnny Bryant leave? He left for a lateral position. It was a lateral move. And personally, I think he made that lateral move because he might have thought Tibbs was not in any danger here. And he might have looked at that Cavs move and been like, all right, well, I'm there to keep Donovan Mitchell happy because Donovan Mitchell wanted him to be the head coach. And if this goes sideways, I'll be well positioned to take over. And guess what? That happened in Cleveland one time before, where Ty Lue was hired to be the coach in waiting, and then they fired David Blatt, and Ty Lue got to take over. So, they might have been like, hey, you left for a lateral position. Like, we honored that, right? We honored your request to make that move. But we're going to go in a different direction now. And maybe you should have stuck it out. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that, but they know him better than anybody. So I'll trust their judgment on that, on why that is the case. I don't know.
I definitely trust their judgment, but also we know that Leon maintains relationships. So it is curious that if he wasn't part of the plans, I'm surprised there wasn't even a leak that like, oh, the Knicks have interest or have interviewed Johnny Bryant. Right? Just to at least.
Well, I mean, the main thing that's come out though is that they've wanted an experienced head coach, right? That's been like kind of like the recurring theme of what people have reported is they want an experienced head coach.
They interviewed Nori and Borrego, right? So.
Yeah, but do we know that they were actually interviewed? Like, yeah, they might have been interviewed under the pretense of a head coaching position, but it also could have been like, hey, we're not going to get to interview them for an assistant coaching staff, like an assistant coaching position, unless we interview them for the head coaching position. So we don't know what the intent was of a lot of these interviews. There might have been interviews that we don't even know about for all, like, a lot of this stuff is leaking out slowly. So I'll be honest, like when the Borrego name first came up, like I personally didn't feel he was a serious candidate for the head coaching position, but I did think that he would be a good candidate for an offensive coordinator type position. So that's the way I read it. Is, to me, they, at least of the names that were reported, it feels like to me that Brown, Jenkins, and Nori were interviewed as actual head coaching candidates, and Borrego has been interviewed more as an assistant coach type candidate. Maybe he could have changed that in interviews. If I don't know, like I obviously I have no clue what the hell they were thinking or what was asked of each of these candidates in their interviews. That's just how I read the tea leaves, kind of. The Nori thing is interesting just because we know Gershon Rosas came from Minnesota, so he probably has some background knowledge of Mike Nori, or more extended background knowledge of Mike Nori than anybody else in the front office. So that might have been one where it's like, hey, maybe, even though he doesn't have head coaching experience, we're willing to at least give this guy a chance in the interviews to see what the vibe is, based on one of our front office members kind of like their recommendations. But yeah, I just think the Johnny Bryant thing was, maybe they wanted an experienced head coach, and maybe they think that Johnny Bryant, throwing him into the mix here, if they were to hire him, maybe that wouldn't have been the best situation for him, and therefore not the best situation for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, we should talk a little bit about what's going on around the NBA. What do you make of what the Bucks are doing? They just gave a Bobby Bonilla deal to Dame.
I think that, is it smart? No, I don't think it's smart. But if you're not, I think it's a lot easier to say trade Giannis. That's a smart thing to do. Versus when you're a team like Milwaukee, you're a small market team, you're never going to land one of these guys in free agency. I mean, and as it is, we know that landing top level players in free agency at this point is extremely difficult to do, or rare to do, more importantly. And then like getting one in trades is extremely hard, because if that player doesn't really want to be there, there's always a threat that they could just kind of they'll eventually ask out anyway. And you have to deplete your assets to get them. Like, it's a difficult thing. So your best avenue is through the draft, and in all likelihood, no matter how well you draft, no matter what your return is for Giannis Antetokounmpo, it's very unlikely that you're going to land a player like Giannis anytime in the next 15, 20, 25 years. Like, it's just very, very rare to get a player of that caliber, and it's even harder for small market teams to do that. So I think would it be the more prudent decision if you were doing like a risk analysis of the Milwaukee Bucks? Would the smart play be to trade Giannis? Yeah, of course. But if you're also considering like, gate receipts, interest in the community, TV ratings, all that type of shit, I think it becomes a little bit more complicated. And if you then are going to keep him, then you have to take big risks. Yeah, they took a big risk on Dame and blew up in their face. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to sit here, waste the entire year? I mean, it would have been a waste of a year, right? Like, it would have been a waste of a year if they just had Dame sitting out with his Achilles injury, which would have been the case, and you play out your roster having made fringe moves, or play the season having made fringe moves to the roster. That's just how it is. So, it's a big fucking risk they took. And quite honestly, I don't think it's going to work out for them. But I can respect that they took that swing. I can understand why they did it. And I think, like, say whatever you want about Myles Turner. Say whatever you want about the decision to not just give him the contract, but then also weigh the fact that you're eating a $22.5 million dead cap hit over the next 5 years. Myles Turner is basically the best version of a big that you could want to pair with Giannis Antetokounmpo. So they got the best version of a critical archetype that you want next to your best player, your franchise player. I think that's worth respecting, even if we all can agree that the nuts and bolts of it and the actual, bottom line value of it is not, it's a vast overpay. I can respect it. And they still have their 2031 first, I believe, to trade, and a 2032 pick swap. Maybe they can turn that into something. We'll see. But yeah, I'm okay with what they've done. It's just, it's very, I don't know how you manage a lot of this stuff when you're going to have a $22.5 million dead cap it's sitting on your cap sheet for the next 5 fucking seasons. Especially with, we all know the second apron hard cap and stuff like that. Like, that's a cap that you can't even move, right? It's not, you can't trade it. You can't buy it out. It's just sitting there on your cap sheet for the foreseeable future. You're muted, Stacy.
Imagine if you could stretch, or if you could trade stretch salary. Is that actually just illegal?
It is, but I think they should allow it.
Yeah, it'd make for an interesting dynamic. I mean, you're not going to get it with 5 seasons, right? But if they could trade it 2 years in with a first or something. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to compete, but it seems like Giannis is like, I'll stay if we're just giving it the old college try, I guess. Turner's what, 27, 28 now?
Mm-hmm. He's 29, I believe. I'll check.
Yeah, so there's not a whole lot of upside there. They still lack playmaking. Maybe if Dame really was just a bad fit for Giannis, there's
He'll be 29 next year.
Maybe that works. You're maybe keeping Giannis a little bit off. You're keeping him away from the. Did he play much 5 last year? Even I don't think so. So they've been keeping him from that role anyway. Yeah, it's interesting. It's also, I mean, the ripple effect from that Halliburton injury looks pretty wild because if he doesn't get hurt, even if they lose in 7, they're not going to disassemble the team, right? Is this just them being cheap, or are there other considerations that people maybe, because it looks just like
I think there's
definitely, because you said they're not the second apron, right? So this isn't
they're
using.
Not even in the first apron. They were not going to be in any apron. They were just going to have entered the tax.
Yeah, so it's got to be. I never thought I'd feel sorry for Indiana Pacers fans, but here we are, and it doesn't look great. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the East is just. I'm very curious to see who pops up. Toronto signed Pirtle to a big contract. I don't know what they're doing. They fired their GM. They're apparently shopping IQ and RJ. I can't think of more than 2 contenders, but I can think of more than 4 decent teams in the East next year.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, maybe Philly gets healthy. We've been saying that for a long time. Yeah, the last thing. So one thing I did want to talk about. I know you had a tweet where you proposed a trade that was essentially, there were a lot of moving parts, but the Knicks would trade Cat and Bridges, and they would get back LeBron, PJ, and PJ Washington and Najee Marshall in a 3-team trade. The Mavs would get, I think from your trade, Bridges and was it Mitch? Did you send them Mitch, or was that
No? Mitch stayed.
Mitch stays. Who was the last person who was the other person that Dallas?
It was just Bridges and Mitch, basically.
Not Mitch.
Or sorry, Bridges and
well, you had Cat going to LA.
Yeah, Bridges and Cat. There's Bridges and Cat.
Yeah, but Cat went to LA. So who's the other? Anyway, the point is, I think for the Mavs, that was probably the only part of that trade that you proposed that probably wouldn't have worked out, or would have been they wouldn't have been as happy about. How likely do you think that kind of a move is? I think with LeBron, I think the big question, I think that trade makes the Knicks better, not just because you're getting LeBron, but you're trading Cat for LeBron, which has its downsides. You're turning Bridges into 2+ rotation players, starter level players. PJ, who gives you some versatility. Do you think that kind of move is likely? And if you were to make that move, do you have any pivots if LeBron is going to retire after this year, or if LeBron declines a little bit, or what are your kind of contingencies there?
Well, I mean, if LeBron declines, it's what it is. That's the risk you're.
No, not the trade. I mean, you make the trade and then he retires at the end of the year or something.
Well, then you're fucked. I mean, I wouldn't make the trade if I was concerned that he might retire after this upcoming season. I would need to know that he's going to at least play 1 more year, preferably 2 more years. If he was going to retire after the year, there's no way to make the trade because, yeah, you're going to get some cap flexibility out of it. Maybe you'll have access to mid-level exception, the full mid-level. You'll be under the first apron or whatnot. But that's not really what's important anymore, right? It's getting the best talent. And yeah, I if that was the case, I wouldn't do the trade. Now, aside from that, yeah, I'd still do the trade. I think it's worth it. I think that, and even if you think it's too complicated, in terms of the all the other ancillary stuff, the fact that you can trade Cat for LeBron, say it up. So let's just say you did that, you'd save I think they save $600,000-$700,000, which which on the margins the Knicks are working at is not nothing. I would. I think I'd roll the dice, man. I think I would. I think it's very hard. To me, the trades that I've seen people kind of like throw out there for Cat are ridiculous and not inspiring. And I would posit that it's a lot harder to make a Cat trade where the Knicks end up actually getting closer to a title than anything else, and definitely harder than a lot of people seem to think. But like, I think there is an element of what LeBron brings to the table, kind of like the fact that you would have the type of defensive wings to protect him, kind of alleviate his load. His playmaking obviously can open up Brunson off the ball, which was, something that we were not able to experience enough of since we've traded, or since Randall has been out and then traded. There's a lot of value to it on court and a lot of justifiable reason for it. But by the sounds of it, it doesn't seem like LeBron's going to get traded. Sounds like he might get bought out. In which case, like if that means that I have to move off of Tyler Kolek or something, or Pacome Dadier to clear out, like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And if that's the case, like, I mean, the Knicks would become pretty instantly the heavy favorites in the East in such a scenario. But would I trade Cat straight up for LeBron? Yeah, I think I would. If I knew that he was going to play more than a year, I think I would roll the dice there. But I also respect people that think that's fucking crazy, because for most of my, like, especially the last like 5, 6, 7 years, like I've been like, I don't know, man. Like, trading for LeBron is really difficult because it comes with this thing, it comes with that thing. I do think the fact that if he came to the Knicks, this would be the most talented team he's played on since he last won a championship matters. He definitely feel like he's coming to a team that has an actual chance to compete, which is more or less his main gripe, right, with the Lakers, where he's like, we have no chance to compete. And he's right. They have no fucking chance to compete. They just lost Dorian Finney-Smith for absolutely nothing. And Dorian Finney-Smith is not even like this all-world player, but that's how important he is to the Lakers, because he's one of their few players that is actually capable of staying on the floor in the postseason. They lost him for nothing. They replaced him with Jake LaRavia, who, like, okay, maybe he's better bang for your buck, but if I'm going to war tomorrow, I want Dorian Finney-Smith over Jake fucking LaRavia. It's just how it is. Their center, they don't have a center on the roster. Like, it's a disaster right now. They're going to Adio Thoreau. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Yeah, he's going to be like a main rotation player this year. And I understand that he's
Prez will be happy.
Yeah, that's great. But like, I don't think Prez would be happy if I told him the Knicks drafted him and, by the way, he's going to be our sixth man. Like, like it's just not. This is not a winning scenario. They're not going to win a championship. And it's great that they got Luka, but because they got Luka, they're operating on a totally different timeline, and they should, justifiably so. I get why the Lakers are operating the way they are. But if I'm LeBron, I get why he opted in. And I get why he's leaking that there's no trade market for him and there's no interest for him around the league. And the ball's in there.
Was anyone reported that they would consider a buyout? Because
Windhorst has hinted that that's the way it would have to happen. And he holds all the cards here. He holds all the cards here because he has a no trade clause. And he has this is the only year left on his contract. So what, do the Lakers want to lose him for nothing? Do they want to pay him the entire year to sit there? Because we know when LeBron's not happy, he can make sure that shit sucks for everybody.
Well, if you waive him, then you're stretching that over multiple years, right?
No, they could just waive him, like just cut him for the year.
Final year?
Yeah.
That is interesting. I mean, you probably. I do think there's a team probably out there that can come up with 50 mil and throw a second round pick in, right? So I would imagine that's what you're going up against. I don't know how someone like Oklahoma City or Houston gets there or something, but I would imagine that's what you're up against. Maybe Myles Turner. Well, the Bucks can't trade Myles Turner, right? So
LeBron's not going to go to fucking Houston. He's not going to go to Milwaukee. He's not. Come on, man. It's LeBron. He's not going to go to. He's definitely not going to Milwaukee. That's 100. Like, I can guarantee that LeBron James is not going to play a second of his fucking career other than road games in Milwaukee. I will guarantee.
Somehow kept Giannis.
I don't think he's going to Milwaukee, man.
I mean, played in Cleveland.
Yeah, that's different. That's home. That's different. It's a very, very different scenario. And he was the man on that team. He goes to Milwaukee. He's not the man on that team. He knows that.
He's not the man on this team either.
I think that's for us. Maybe that's a little bit. That's how we would feel. That's how we would rightfully feel. I'm not sure that's how the national media will portray it.
So the Becky Hammond narrative ends in a stalemate, a draw.
Yeah,
if we win the championship.
yeah. Then she can call it. Well, they won because LeBron's 6'8".
Guess so.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens, LeBron. I think that the good thing is the Knicks have done their big pieces of business, it seems, so far, at least in the free agent market. As I said, I still think that they have some things going on in the background. We'll see if anything comes out of it. Maybe, I don't know, trade. Maybe if they don't come to an extension agreement with Mikal Bridges or Mitchell Robinson, then yeah, I think they will be traded. I do not think they'll carry that into the regular season.
Is there anyone on your radar there? Because Jaren Jackson Jr. just signed.
No.
So.
Nope. Nothing on my radar. I'm not putting anything out there because I don't know anything.
I'm talking about conjecture, right? Just like
I don't. I really don't. I mean, I've suggested some trades, but I don't have anything serious. I don't think there's any slam dunk moves with those guys. Personally, I don't even think I would want to trade Mitchell Robinson right now. Would I be open to? I mean, I'm open to trading either of the guys, but I haven't seen a trade that anybody has posited that I'm like, wow, that's what a slam dunk. Got to do that. No, I haven't seen anything. So, it's not just those two. I think Josh Hart could get traded. Why the fuck can't Josh Hart get traded?
Because our coach wants to play him 5,000 minutes a game.
Yeah, thankfully that's not the coach anymore. But I mean, I think those three guys. I'm not convinced that any of those three guys are 100% here next season. The only two guys I'm confident for sure there's more, but obviously Yabusele and Clarkson 100% will be here next year. But Brunson, OG feel very, very and Cat to a lesser extent, but still pretty confident will be here next year. Other than that, I think anybody could still viable to be moved, and I think people should not be. Rose has already shown us that he's willing to make big moves, unexpected moves, bold moves, if he thinks it's the right move. So we'll see. I'm just not going to write it off. We saw that they made a trade as late as the day before training camp last year. So, yeah. Stacy, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
Nothing plug. Stacy Patton 89. Miranda just had a piece on the Strickland, which I will plug. His reflections on where the Knicks are right now. I would recommend reading everything that Miranda puts out. And yeah, that's all I got to plug.
Awesome. I have nothing to plug myself, so I'll plug all the wonderful work at the Strickland. Check it out. Check out the article that Stacy just mentioned by Miranda. There's been a bunch of good work, so give it a read. That is our show for today. I hope everybody has a great evening, and I will see you on Friday. Peace.